Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday night, December 2nd at 7 o'clock, and we are in regular session tonight. Our first item of business is establishing a quorum, and all members of council are present tonight. Next item of business is disposition of the minutes for the regular session of City Council held on November 18th, 2019.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second then for approving these minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the minutes have been approved. Next item of business is communications, and I want to let the public know that council members will be attending two different events in the coming weeks, which would be considered a public meeting, and so we always make those available so that the community knows what we're doing. On December 4th, there will be four council members who will be, three council members and myself, who will be attending a tour of the Bailey's Trail, and that's December 4th, and I believe that's at 1 p.m., 1 to 3 p.m. And then on December 14th, council members, every other year when we have new council members coming in, we have an orientation. So there will be an orientation on December 14th at the Ohio University Inn from 8:30 in the morning until 1:30 in the, well, maybe 1 o'clock, maybe 1:30 in the afternoon. We'll try and be quick about that. So thank you. Do we have any other communications from other council members? Councilmember Katsas and then Councilmember McGee.
Yes, President Nisley, thank you. As everybody is wrapping up the year, the Athens City School Board will be having one more regular board meeting, and that will be happening Thursday, December 19th, 6:30 p.m., and that is at the Athens High School Auditorium.
Thank you. Councilmember McGee.
I just wanted to let the mayor know that I've heard numerous compliments about the city parking garage, how beautiful it looks, and that people are actually encouraged to park there. I would also tell you that I've also heard from a citizen who's purchased an e-bike that we now have two e-bikes in Athens, but we're both concerned about not having a parking space that's sheltered from the rain, so perhaps the city can do something about that. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Patterson, you have an answer for
I know
this.
this is atypical, President Knightley,
Okay.
but I want to share with you that we are exploring bike lockers to go into a parking space or two in the parking garage. So not only sheltered, but a more secure space if someone wants to park there long term. Now, whether that'll have a power outlet in there, I don't know, McGee. But
Very good.
We can look into that too. But just as I appreciate that, I really do.
Sure.
We are exploring other parking options for bicycles.
Great. All right. I'll return to reports and communications from other elected officials. Law Director Eliason. Okay. Auditor Hecht.
No report.
Mayor Patterson.
I just have one, President Nisley, and that is just to remind anyone that there was a boil order that was issued earlier today. There's a boil order in effect from 1:30 today, so underway obviously, till 3 p.m. tomorrow, the 3rd, South Schaefer between Bayard, however you want to pronounce it, and Moore Avenue.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on now to ordinances for third reading, the first of which is 1/2019. And this is an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 7, Chapter 7.05, Parking Regulations, and introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Nisley. I'd like to make a motion to adopt Ordinance 1/2019.
Second.
Thank you. And this ordinance makes two changes to the uptown parking. First was that it makes low intensity, and the new part is all accessible parking spaces. The 25 cents per half hour or 50 cents per hour. So setting the accessible parking spaces to the lowest metered price uptown. And the second change is that the meters will be enforced until 7 p.m. rather than 8 p.m.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 1/2019. Are there any comments or questions from council members? Administration or the audience? Okay. We'll have the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12119 is an ordinance rezoning portions of Court Street, State, Carpenter, and Fern Streets from a B3 zone to a B2D zone and is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 12119.
Second.
Thank you. This has gone before the planning board and the city council, and we've had public hearing and multiple meetings about it. It's to help Uptown become much more logical in its zoning, and make it a more appropriate zone than what it is now, which is much more of a suburban type of zoning than a urban type. Thank you.
So we have a motion and second for approval of 12119. Do we have any additional comments or questions from council members? Okay. And from the mayor? Yes.
There was a question that came up to council at the last regular session and the regular session before that, and that was about parking spaces. So I've asked Paul Loeb, city planner, to put together something for you. There will be a visual as well as what he has determined to be the parking on the north block of Court Street. Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council. If I may distribute these quickly and then I'll talk for a couple minutes. Okay.
Thanks.
Council, good evening. Paul Loeb, planner for the city, Old Coach Road in Athens. I was asked to put together some information regarding the current situation on Court Street, on that north end of Court Street, regarding current business uses and the amount of parking that's required versus the amount of parking that's currently in existence. I put together a spreadsheet that I believe all 8 members had before them. What that spreadsheet identifies is, in the first column, of course, is all the current businesses in that B3 zone. The second column lists the type of business use, and that's the type of business use as identified in the off-street parking requirements, Table B of the zoning code. And then the third column is an estimate of the square footage of each of those commercial spaces. That is an estimate. I think in most situations it's probably an overestimation. A lot of our square footage requirements don't include things like storage rooms, restrooms, small offices, break rooms, things like that aren't included. It's usually about the square footage of the actual showroom or the restaurant areas. And then there's the number of parking spaces that would be required per code based upon those square footage. And as you can see, that the parking required per code for that B3 area that's in question is about 504 spaces. Then I looked at the number of current parking spaces that are required, and then whether there's a variance that exists for that use, whether they're grandfathered in, or whether they meet the current requirements. All of the ones that are identified in orange currently have a variant, are currently compliant. And then there's 2 that have variances. That includes Casa Nueva and the overhang, which was previously the greenery and a couple incantations after that. So by my calculations, including the Athens Armory, which has about 12 parking spaces, but it's currently not in use and is a public building, there's about 154 parking spaces that are currently existing in that zone. But there's a required of 504. If we subtract the variances in any parking spaces at the Armory, we have about 384 that should be required, but only 142 that are currently existent. So we have a deficit of about 240 parking spaces from what's required based on the B3 zoning requirements versus what's actually in place. So what I was curious about is, as a planner, I'm looking at land use issues. And what is the actual land use implication of those 240 parking spaces that our zoning code is saying we need to have that we cannot meet? And so I started looking at areas of the city that have a really good example of parking requirements, very similar. The easiest one to find, of course, is Walmart. As we all know, there's plenty of parking at Walmart. And I counted up, using Google Earth, roughly 250 parking spaces at the Walmart. And then I calculated the area of that space. That's 2.5 acres. Then I looked at within that B3 zone, this is State Street, Court Street, Carpenter, what does 2.5 acres of land look like? And that is all of this right here. So based on our current code of existing commercial uses in that B3 zone that we're discussing rezoning, if we were to get it compliant, which is what our zoning code wants, the expectation is that everything eventually comes into conformance. For that area to come into conformance with B3, we would have to eliminate all of this to create surface parking.
Thank you. Questions for Paul?
That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Councilmember Katsas?
Yes, thank you. Just doing a quick tabulation, it looks like we only have maybe less than a third of the businesses are currently in compliance
That's
with.
correct, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, many of them are grandfathered in. However, grandfather status is only if a business goes out for whatever purpose, closes, out of business, et cetera. If that storefront goes dormant for 12 months, it loses its grandfather status. So any new business that would come into that storefront would then have to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals and get a variance even to open up.
And Councilmember McGee, sorry.
Thank you. This is just an off point, but it would seem to me that Athens has a number of empty parking spaces in the evenings when certain businesses are not actually operating, and there seems to be no effort whatsoever to make it so that any of those parking areas could be available to the public. Do you know, has anything ever been done to approach the local businesses, any incentive maybe to open them up?
I apologize, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off,
that's
Councilman. We have discussed that internally. There are certainly, that could be a very good practice, in my opinion. Our current code doesn't allow for that, doesn't allow for shared parking requirements under the zoning code. What this is assuming is that you have discrete uses at all places. So you go to get your hair cut at one place, there's parking space available for you. You go across the street to get a pizza, there's parking available at the pizza parlor, et cetera. Having shared parking requirements, that can be effective, where you've got a bank that's open from 8 to 4, and then you've got a restaurant that's typically either peak demand is in the evening. There's situations where businesses have done that in Athens, but our current code does not allow that by right. You would still have to go to get a variance. You'd have to negotiate an agreement between two property owners, two business owners, in order to make that work.
Do you know of any cities that do that kind of practice?
Not offhand. I'm familiar with that use, though. I'm familiar with that strategy. Yeah, it can get complicated because the city may allow it, but then you still have a private property owner who may say no. I don't want other people's businesses parking on my parking. How are we going to maintain those parking spaces? How do you deal with, who damaged the light pole or created the pothole or something like that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Crowell?
Mr. Logue, thank you for being here tonight. I appreciate the visual of all of those businesses that have complied with the code. If this changes zones, what happens to those people who are in compliance?
Well, if they're comfortable with the parking situation that they have, nothing. There's no requirement, of course. Even in a B2D zone, you're allowed to, if you want to create parking for your business, you would be allowed to. But there's no requirement in the B2D zone that you create commercial parking. There's always a requirement for residential parking. That's why that analysis I provided to you only shows the analysis for commercial. So residential requirements would still be required to be met under this potential change of zoning. But if a business has parking spaces that they utilize, that they desire for whatever reason, then that's their parking to continue to use as they see fit.
So they might choose to use the space for something else,
They could, yeah.
which would make the area have less parking available.
Potentially, right. Off-street parking. Now, again,
Yeah, right.
none of this calculates in the amount of on-street parking that's available, the
Right.
number of street meters, the existence of parking in the parking garage. And as was just discussed earlier, that we're hearing good comments on the changes we've made at the parking garage.
Right, and I don't doubt that this, and we've talked about this parking issue needing to be solved. But there is the potential that the people in compliance no longer need to be in compliance, do something else with space that they have, and people park in the close-in neighborhoods in order to go to businesses on the north end of town. Possibility.
Anything's possible.
Thank you.
Mayor Patterson.
To that point, just today at noon, I drove the length of Court Street, but only started counting open parking spaces at the meters from State Street down to Carpenter, Carpenter to East State Street, back up to the city building, basically, of College, and I didn't count those. But I ended up counting 13 on North Court Street, and a total of 33 if you counted Carpenter open spaces, East State Street. You know, I just chose parking spaces, metered parking spaces that are easy walking distance to the uptown businesses on the north block itself. So that's not even counting, you know, parking meters on College or parking meters elsewhere on Union or Court, other than, like I said, Court Street from State Street on up to Carpenter. So again, that's noon. That's the lunch hour when people are really out and mobile, getting around, going to get something to eat, driving around. And I have to reiterate what one of the things that the city planner said is that that formula is based on unique visits. So as he was indicating, it's driving to the barber shop, and then from there you're going to drive to a place for pizza, and from there you're going to go drive somewhere else to go get some jewelry at Chapman's Jewelers or something. You know, those are all discrete parking, you know, which is part of that parking requirement. You know, formulated on discrete parking, discrete trips. You know, the other thing too, and Council, you know this, is that we've got a robust Athens public transit system that runs right down there too. And I just have to say this one more time, twice now in the planning of the comprehensive plan, that this has been in there, but it was in the first comprehensive plan, it's in this comprehensive plan that, you know, will be deployed soon to rezone North Court Street.
Yes, comments.
Well,
Councilmember Fall.
To follow up on that, also, our own parking plan that we did do as a planning process, also shows that there's a lot more available parking up towards the north. I think that the visual of how much surface area one would have to convert in order to make everything compliant should be shocking to people, because that's a waste. It's a waste of land use. I think this also shows that some of our parking requirements and the code that does deal with parking needs to be updated, because there should be availability of being able to do a day and night. You know, like the county doesn't use all of their parking. They may be able to make, you know, an agreement with somebody else. Those sort of solutions, and more progressive solutions, should be allowed by our code. Thank you.
We might have some audience members who'd like to make a comment. Yes, thank you, Paul, for being here. And we are asking, just so we have it for the record, everybody does need to sign in before they start speaking, and I will not start the timer until you look up from signing in. If you could give us your name and address, and if you represent a group.
Joan Kornansky, 56 Mount Street, Athens. What's this? I have a few comments, a couple of questions, and I just, in general comment, when I walked up here, and generally when I walk up to a council meeting about 7-ish, all the bars on Court Street are starting to fill up. This is like a little metaphor for parking. But it's Monday right after Thanksgiving, so maybe there's no cars on the streets today because there's no students in the bars today because there's a lot of people that aren't back in town. So I don't think the looking at how many parking places are empty on the street of Athens today is really a good day to do it, because I don't think there's a lot of people facilitating uptown today. If the bars were any reflection, because they were pretty much empty when I walked up here. So just a passing thought. I also want to say that when I was on the Board of Zoning Appeals, there was a restaurant out on Richland Avenue that opened and didn't have enough parking, and they were able to make an arrangement with the large parking area across the street. There used to be a mall there, and there were some other buildings there. I mean, not a mall, but a small shopping area. And we did grant a variance. The owners of the parking lot property across the street and the restaurant were both in agreement, and we did grant them a variance based on those parking places. So we do that in our town, and the Board of Zoning Appeals has been agreeable to that, to allowing multiple businesses to use the same, each other's parking places. I'm not sure I got a direct answer on my question. The visual was very interesting, that giant parking lot at Walmart's. And I think that's almost a scare tactic. You're going to pave all the top part, North Court Street, so you can put in parking? Come on. We're not going to do that. I'm concerned about those 150 parking places and where they're going to go. If you want to walk somewhere today, walk up Grosvenor, walk up Franklin, walk up Mount Street. Oh, I walked up North Congress Street. There is no parking. And where are those cars going to go? And like I said before, maybe the businesses that are now located on the north block of North Court Street and Carpenter, and if I'm not mistaken, we're including East State Street around the corner to Fern Alley, which would also include the large building where the DEM headquarters are. So I don't know if Paul counted all of that in his calculations. It's a B3 because it's adjacent to a neighborhood. Neighborhoods. Okay. And I think it needs to stay that way. If it doesn't, we're going to have problems with, rumors are spreading out amongst people. A new bar may go in where the
Joni, you need to summarize because the 3 minutes is up.
Okay. So anyways, I think the concern is that we're going to add more apartments, which means more congestion and more parking problems that are going to drift into the neighborhoods if this zone is changed. I think it needs to stay a B3 to protect those close-in neighborhoods, and that's why it was initially put in that position.
Okay,
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment? Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 12119. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay, so we have 2 no votes then. And, but the motion does carry and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12219 is an ordinance amending the 2019 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 2219.
Second.
Thank you. This has been read twice. We've discussed it in committee. Essentially, we're making some year-end appropriation movements here for the fire department, funds to cover the year-end expenses, and water debt fund to pay down a $100,000 loan and a rollover $150,000. And we just discussed this time passing.
Okay, so we have a motion and second for approval of 12219. Are there any comments or questions from council members or administration or the audience? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We now have ordinances for second reading. And I have one question. This may just be out of the order. Okay. And the first ordinance for second reading is 11019, and this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement to provide financial support from the city's transient guest tax to the Outdoor Recreation Council of Appalachia, known as ORCA, for funding the Bailey's Trail System, along with other recreational activities, and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner. And we are on our second reading, but I know that I think there are some people here who want to make comments. Is there anybody amongst the council members or administration who would like to make a comment first?
I have no comments.
Okay. Mayor Patterson.
I would just like to give council an update. Last week, I reached out to an individual that Nick Zangali, that I mentioned to you before, from Novogradic LLC up in Cleveland, suggested I reach out to an individual at Cleveland State University whose name is Kirby Date, D-A-T-E. And Kirby is an expert in the area of kind of modeling community impacts with different projects, whether it's a business or it can be commercial, it could be housing for that matter. Anyway, I sent her the information that Seth Brown of Quantified Ventures had sent to me, the same documents that I had sent to Nick Zangali, and asked if she would give, look it over and give her opinion on the report that Seth Brown had put together. She did. She looked at it on Friday and called me back that later on that day and said that everything that she reviewed looked solid, in her words, in terms of the performance measures for the Bailey Trail System, as well as the formula that was used to derive, the potential riders to ride based upon how close the larger metropolitan areas are, whether it's Cincinnati, Cleveland, Dayton, Columbus, Pittsburgh, and elsewhere. And she also indicated that the software that he was using to make those formulas is one of the best in the field, and that she uses that software to drive those. The one comment that she did have is she said that she was surprised at how conservative Quantified Ventures was in those numbers. She feels that the numbers are going to be much higher than what was in there. But Seth Brown and Quantified Ventures used a very conservative estimate to identify what the potential numbers of riders, of anybody using the trail system would be. She feels that that attendance on the trail system is going to be much higher than that. So there you have the complete, both from the formula and the potential riders on the trail, as well as the financials, which was what I was requested to come up with.
And council members are also in receipt of a letter from Rural Action reporting on their power grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission that details that they will be completing 31 miles of the Bailey's Trail System with that power grant money. So council members did just receive that narrative before council tonight. Councilmember Crowell.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to direct council's attention to one of the emails that we have received. I believe we've received almost 100 emails in support of the trail system. We received one recently from a well-respected analyst at the Voinovich School of Leadership and Public Affairs, Mr. John Glazer. And his email is a little bit different than the others, and I do hope that all council members look at it closely. He looks at the tangible, as the mayor has shown us, as well as the intangible, some of the social benefits of the system for the county, for our city, as well as for Chansey. And I just thought it was an excellent message, and I recommend everybody read it carefully. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. I also wanted to acknowledge 2 points, one of which was a handout that we received from the mayor, in which one of the paragraphs references a study from the University of Minnesota, Duluth. It's an economic study by the College of Business there. in which 100-mile of trail, single track, investment of $6 to $7 million from a variety of city, state, and federal funds brings in somewhere between $36 and $48 million to the Duluth area. To me, that's significant. And this, again, is not frivolous information. So I wanted that to be on the record. Likewise, I've received emails and comments from the running community as well as the hiking community also expressing interest and support for this, acknowledging that it too would be used by them as well beyond just bicycle riders. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments from council members? I know we have some audience members here, and it's good to see nearly a full house again, and so, with interest in Bailey's. And I will ask that if people are wanting to speak tonight, that we give first preference to those who have not spoken before. And if you are going to speak again tonight, if it is a new comment, we welcome that comment if you have new information to add. So is there anyone that would like to speak? I know there are several. They came in. Sure, come on up. And you do need to sign in, and then for the camera and the audience, your name and address, and if you represent a group. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Joseph Leidecker of Black Diamond Trail Designs. I'm from North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina. We've been out on the project working since the beginning of October, and it's been a great opportunity. And I kind of want to just express, from my experience, the kind of opportunity that is here. I've had the chance to see projects similar, not necessarily in the size and the time frame that this project is projected to have, with towns like in Cherokee with Fire Mountain, where there's a casino out there, and the tourism and things were kind of fading out a little bit, and they introduced this I think it's right at 15 mile system, and the town has just kind of really accepted it, and you can see businesses growing and just different aspects of the town, the community changing in a very positive way. I think a lot of projects like that, they're expecting the recreational trails to bring maybe money into a place that isn't ready to capture this money, or isn't ready to, they're wanting to change a community and mold it around recreation, where I think this community, in my opinion, is already set up for that. The infrastructure is there with the greenways. You have the tourism with the food and the lodging. Everything's already here. So you put a system that's going to be as diverse with the amount of different construction crews and everything that's going on. You put a system like that with the Bailey's trail system here. I think it's just going to flourish. It's just going to be beyond imagination. And I think you said something about Duluth. I'm not sure. I've never been to Duluth, but I can imagine you could expect the same, if not better, results, from this project. And that's just that's kind of my opinion from what I have seen in this area and the hospitality this area has. It's just got all the bones that it needs for this project to be incredible. So,
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam President, members of council, Mr. Mayor, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I am not one of your constituents. I never have been. I've always lived on the perimeter of town, but I did work 30 plus years at Oblenis Hospital and paid my share of taxes. So,
And your name, please, so the
I'm
rest of
sorry,
the audience
James
knows.
Schultz. James
Thank you.
Schultz. I retired, so right now all I do is spend money. And the way I spend my money is I find towns that have projects like the Bailey's operational. I go to them, I play for days, I spend a certain amount of money there, and then I come back to Athens, the place that I love. And I'm glad they're talking about bike lockers now, because I wish they'd talked about them 40 years ago, because I could have used it every day. I commuted every single day to a Buenos Hospital to work. So cycling is in the blood of this town, has been always. That's why I moved here. And that's why I'd like to stay here, and I'd like to retire here. And I like the opportunity at the age of 90 to be riding those trails. And they're going to be that kind of trail. I've been out there, I helped, lay them out. I went out a couple days to help survey them, and it's a gem. It's an absolute gem. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Sure.
Good evening. My name is Tracy Kitts. I am a longtime resident of Athens. I've worked in economic development in some way or another for the last 25 years. First as the CEO of the National Business Incubation Association, which was located here in Athens. I worked up in Washington, D.C. with the International Economic Development Council. So I'm speaking as someone that loves Athens and lives in Athens and wants us to have a community that promotes fitness and outdoor recreation. I want us to be about that, but also from an economic development perspective. And I wrote a letter to council that I hope you all read, but I was talking about this is an opportunity that's unique to towns like Athens. We have this large tract of land, this national forest. Lots of communities don't have that. If we don't do recreation on that land and benefit from that in terms of our economics and becoming the community that we want to be about outdoor recreation, green space, and that sort of thing, the land will be used in some other way eventually. So that's my concern. The other thing is I'm thankful that Seth and others were somewhat conservative on that. I think that communities get in trouble when they start putting all these multipliers on things. However, when I've looked across the nation and I've done training in a lot of towns on economic development, you see communities that invest in things like this. They become the community that they want to be, that we want to be. And also they benefit economically in a way that aligns with everything that we love about Athens, right? It's not going to be smokestacks. It's going to be green space. It's going to be outdoor recreation. So it makes sense economically. It makes sense in terms of what we want to be as a community. So I'll just leave it with that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Kelly Shaw. I'm a longtime Athens resident, 3rd Ward. I also work in Nelsonville and Athens as part of our local arts community. And I'm in support of the Bailey's Trail System. I guess I personally would ask City Council to pass this ordinance as an affirmation of the value of our Southeast Ohio culture. I think Athens celebrates our history and values in so many incredible ways. The beautiful Southeast Ohio History Center, our many restored historic buildings, special collections and exhibitions that I can think of in our museums, art centers, and libraries, as well as traditional and regional live music that is going on, I think, every night somewhere. And especially, I can say, we have a really robust community of local artists and craftspeople carrying on a long legacy of Appalachian resourcefulness and creativity, who I'm really proud to know. So I support the project, of course, as folks have mentioned, as a sound economic investment. But more than that, I guess I see this project as a powerful and unifying opportunity to embrace our community strength and character as we potentially prepare with our neighbors in Chansey and Buchtel and Doneville and Nelsonville to welcome new visitors to our region and really celebrate all of those existing resources. So I guess I am speaking to the more intangible benefits, but I think they're an important consideration. And thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Others who might want to make a comment?
Is there a pen here? Huh?
That's what I usually do. Walk away with a pen.
Hi, my name is Mike Moulton. I live at 20 Graham Drive over near Sells Park. I've lived in Athens, I think just almost 25 years. My wife and I moved here from the West. I grew up in California. We lived in Utah just prior to coming here. And I'd just like to speak a little bit about, so first of all, last week, a couple weeks ago, I sent an email to the city council members in support of the Bailey's project. And I appreciate many of you responded back to me, and I appreciated that response. I appreciate that you're listening. I appreciate that you give us an opportunity to speak here and that you're listening to our concerns. My concern is that we don't move forward with this project. I've traveled quite a bit with my job. My job takes me out of state I cover about 6 states around here. Prior to that, I covered another 4 states. So I've been to South Carolina all the way out to Indiana, Michigan. I travel a lot with my job, and every week I take my bike with me. Most of the time it's my mountain bike. I have the experience of going to trails around the country and seeing what kind of support there is, what kind of activity there is out there. And there's one trail in particular, I think, of Brown County over in southern Indiana. Every time I'm there, and our Bailey's project will be similar to that project, every time I'm there, I meet 10, 15, 20 people from that are riding there, and most of them are from out of state. And I'm always surprised when I come to, when I talk to other mountain bikers, how often when they say, where are you from? I say, I'm from Athens, Ohio. And they say, they know about the Bailey's project. I mean, there are people that already in the biking community in the eastern United States that already know about the Bailey's project. And they have all said, hey, we can't wait till it's built. We will come, we will come. As Jim Schultz said, I travel exclusively, whenever I travel, I'm going to trail systems. I go to Crested Butte, Colorado. I go to Moab, Utah. I go to Idaho. I go California. I go someplace, Salt Lake City. I don't go someplace where I'm not going to go on the trails. And when I go there, I stay in hotels. I buy gas. I buy Gatorade or Powerade at the gas stations. I go to restaurants. There's a tremendous economic impact for people like me who do those kinds of things. I don't have the resources, the studies to show the economic impact, but I can tell you with a huge level of confidence, what I see anecdotally is that this will be a very huge economic benefit to our community. Beyond the economic impact, when we moved here 25 years ago, I came for 2 or 3 years. My wife got a job at the university. I said, okay, I'll come for a couple years, and then I was planning to leave. And I really have fallen in love with southeastern Ohio. And our trails, anybody who knows me knows that pretty much every day I'm out on one of our trails, mountain biking, hiking with my kids, trail running, doing something out there. So I hope that the City Council will support this project. I think it will be great for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay. All right. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here tonight. All right. If no other comments, then we'll move on to the next ordinance. And that's Ordinance 12619, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 7, Chapter 7.05, Parking Regulations, to add Section 7.05.03.1, Residential Parking Permit. And we'll give you all just a moment to exit, and this is also Councilmember Katsas' ordinance, so
something going on?
You want to be here?
Boring now. They're boring. They are now.
Does Mr. Katsas need collected?
He's being collected. He is. There, he's coming back. There he is.
Send the bat signal.
Okay. And we have just to bring you up to speed, we have just read for the second time ordinance 12619, and this is the one that's amending the parking regulations for the city code. Ordinance 120, and I will just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions or comments on this ordinance. Okay. Ordinance 12719 is an ordinance repealing Athens City Code Title 7, Traffic Code, Chapter 7.06, Tow Truck Regulations, and amending to remove Chapter 7.05, Parking Regulations, Section 7.05.32 through 7.05.35, and 7.09.99 T1 and 2 penalties, introduced by Councilmember Katsas. Any comments or questions on that one? Okay. Ordinance 12819 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to participate in the Uptown Special Improvement District, known as a SID, introduced by Councilmember Reisner. No comments or questions? We'll move on to the next one. We now have ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 12919 is an ordinance amending the 2019 appropriation ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me just get up on my computer. I'll be reading this and the next eight other ordinances. I'll lose my voice here. An ordinance amending the 2019 appropriation ordinance, Section 1, the 2019 appropriation ordinance 14018 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $7,500 to Diversion Program Fund 232, Transaction Code 300, to cover 2009. Let's see, hold on. I'm sorry, I missed a page here. I should have said this. This ordinance needs an amendment. So, do you wish me to read the ordinance as it is now and then read the proposed amendment, or?
I've already read the title, so you could make the motion to amend.
Make an amendment. Okay. I'd like to make a motion to amend ordinance 12919.
Second. Jinx.
The reason for the amendment is the necessity to insert the following paragraph, which would read as follows: $13,600 to Athens,
Arts, Parks, and Recreation.
Arts, Parks, and Recreation, Income Tax Fund 273, Transaction Code 300 for the maintenance contract of new charging stations at the pool. I have a question on that, on these charging stations. Are we talking about cell phone charging stations? Because if we are, this is quite a lot of money.
Yes, Mayor Patterson.
These are fast charging stations or level 3 charging station.
For automobiles. And for cars.
For vehicles.
For vehicles.
Yeah, not for cell phones.
Good, okay.
And of note, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, of note, there's revenue associated with these stations such that we anticipate in driving more revenue than will end up being paid out in the maintenance contract.
I see. So it could turn out to be a net plus revenue generator. So that is what's necessary to amend this ordinance.
Okay. So we do, so you've made a motion to amend.
It's been seconded.
12919, and it's been seconded, so we'll vote on that amend. No, we don't need to amend it. Pardon me, it's just been seconded. Oh, who seconded? I'm sorry.
We had
Thank
2
you.
seconds.
Okay.
Councilmember Crowell and I both seconded.
So we have it for the record.
Thank you.
Okay. So all those so that now it's been amended, so all those in favor of that amendment, adding the money in, the 13.6 to Arts, Parks, and Recreation for the maintenance contract to the new charging stations. All those in, Auditor Hecht has something before we vote. Thank you.
I knew
A comment.
I was trying to get away without saying anything. I just want to clarify, when you say Arts, Parks, and Recreation, this money will be coming out of the new loan funds, 273, not
Okay.
270 or 271.
Okay, thank you.
And the station is also coming out of there, the charging station, but there's already money appropriated in the 500s. But a maintenance contract needs to come out of professional services, and there's no money in that account line. So, and they have a healthy balance, unappropriated balance in there for this.
Okay, thanks for the additional
It's good to
information.
know.
All right, so if no other comments or questions, all those in favor of amending this ordinance 12919 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. It's been amended and read for the first time. And now we need to suspend, I believe, on this one.
Yes, we do. I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules for 12919.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that I believe, what is the reason? A bill has to be paid that,
Probably because of the prior year bill for the Hopewell contract in court. Those costs are from last year. There was never a new contract signed, and so the payments weren't made. I mean, there are several things on here I'd like to see get suspended because we're so close to the end of the year, but I don't know if anybody wants to question anything
Okay,
else.
Councilmember Grace has a comment or a question here.
I believe that the Hopewell payment is in ordinance 13019, which is the next one.
Well,
that's for 2017, I believe.
that is the approval. Council has to approve a prior year bill if it's over $3,000. So they only need $7,500 appropriated, which is in the appropriation ordinance. The $12,000 is the total amount they owe.
Okay, so the 7,500 part is within this one, this
Yes.
particular one that
Yes.
we're voting to suspend on right now.
But ordinance 136 that Councilmember Grace is referring to will also have to be suspended for those reasons. So this
Probably.
and that will, in order to pay everything.
This prior
before the
year
end-
bill, that's-
The prior year bill.
Way past due.
Okay, that's clear.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for suspending the rules on 12919. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended, Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 12919.
Second.
I'm not saying another word.
We have a motion and second for approving this the amendment of this appropriation, or this ordinance. Any questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 13019 is an ordinance to make appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Athens, Ohio during the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, and is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm looking at the proposed ordinance here. As you can see from your spreadsheet on our drive, you can see the various funds and the departments that these monies are going to go for. Would the administration or the auditor have anything to add to this?
I don't, other than the 200 and some odd pages of reading. That
Yeah, there's that. Yes. We'll consider it read for the first time.
Okay.
I don't believe it needs to be suspended.
And this is our budget for our expenses for next year.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay. Ordinance 13119 is an ordinance authorizing 2020 staffing levels and non-union compensation, repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 1 says, effective the first pay period of 2020, authorized staffing levels attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference shall be in effect, and all ordinances inconsistent therewith shall be repealed. Section 2, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 731.08, power of legislative authority, as to salaries and bonds, the City of Athens non-union fringe benefits, City Council does hereby authorize a 2% general hourly pay increase for full-time and permanent part-time non-union employees. non-union employees in a probationary status shall not be eligible for any general hourly pay increase. Section 3, City Council does hereby authorize a one-time lump sum payment of 2% to those employees whose general hourly pay rate exceeds or will exceed the maximum pay rate in her pay grade, a copy of which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Said generally hourly pay increase or lump sum payment shall be effective the first pay period 2020.
Okay. All right, any comments or questions? All right. 13219 is an ordinance adopting a fringe benefit package for non-union personnel within the city of Athens and repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. This ordinance is about 27 pages long. I'm not going to read into all of it, actually most of it. I'll allow council to do that. There's many definitions. There are some changes from last year, as you would expect. Some sections have been struck out. There's been new sections added here therein. So I would suggest that all members of council please peruse it before our next session so that they can ask any questions or make comments about it. But this is our standard non-union fringe benefit package approach and procedure. It's no different than it was last year.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Hesley. I'll just briefly acknowledge, similar to what Councilmember Reisner said, is that I encourage council to dig in and do some reading. The challenge with non-union personnel is they don't have a representative. They don't have someone advocating for them.
Absolutely correct.
And you know, so this is the mayor, this is the auditor, this is our clerk. Am I correct? So you know, these are people who don't necessarily have someone fighting for them in this capacity and talking about and discussing. There's many other members that this group and encounter totally encompasses. So it's up to us to make sure that we're familiar and aware and educated on these. Thank you.
Thanks for the comments. 13319 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with the Employee Benefits Service Center to serve as the city's third-party health insurance administrator and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 1 reads, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a contract with the Employee Benefits Service Center to serve as a third-party administrator, TPA, of the city's health insurance program for the period from January 1, 2020 to December 31st, 2020. Said contract shall contain, at a minimum, the following controls. 1, documentation at a level to be determined by the city auditor related to the payments to be made by the TPA shall be submitted to the city and reviewed and approved by the city auditor prior to the authorization of payments. 2, a check register shall be submitted to the city auditor along with the documentation. 3, the TPA shall not issue checks before receiving an authorization notice from the city auditor. 4, the contract shall contain a clause that provides for the city or its auditor to have access to the city-related records of the TPA at the city's request. 5, the contract shall contain language that protects the city in the event of default embezzlement, errors by omission, and other actions actions of the TPA. 6, the contract shall contain language that provides notification and transitional procedures in the event of an acquisition, merger, or sale of the account.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Mayor Patterson.
Just to tell council that the city administration has been pleased with this particular TPA's performance over the past several years, since 2016, I believe. Just encourage council to adopt this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? We'll move on to Ordinance 13419, an ordinance authorizing a stop-loss medical insurance contract and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 1 reads, effective January 1, 2020, the Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a one-year contract with the Sirius America to cover the city's stop-loss insurance. That's it.
Comments or questions? Ordinance 135-19 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 127-17, reallocating revenues from the city income tax and declaring an emergency, introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 1 reads, effective January 1, 2020, Section 1 of Ordinance 127-17 is hereby amended to read as follows. That revenues from the city income tax after deduction of 5.41% for the Street Rehabilitation Fund, 572, and 5.41% for the Arts, Parks, and Recreation Debt Fund, 450, and 2.7% for the payment of expenses associated with the recreation and or / community facility fund, 271, as required under tax levy, shall be allocated directly to funds as follows. A, read as 72 is now amended to 73% to General Fund 101. B, 19% is now amended to 18% to Street Fund 220. C is still 5% to Recreational Fund 270. D, 3% to Capital Improvements Fund 580, E, 1% to Transportation Assistance Fund 240, or 214.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Okay, we'll move on to Ordinance 136-19, an ordinance authorizing the payment of a prior year expense and declaring an emergency, introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we suspend the rules for 136-19.
Second.
Thank you. The reason for the suspension, as we were discussing in Ordinance 129-19, is prior year's billing. It reads as the auditor is hereby authorized to expend up to $12,000 for Diversion Fund 232, Transaction Code 300, to pay a prior year expense to Hopewell Health Center on an invoice just received by municipal court.
So we have a motion and a second for suspending the rules for 136-19. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Reisner.
I move we adopt 136-19.
Second.
Have nothing more to say about it. Got to pay a bill.
We have a motion and second for approval of this ordinance. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 137-19 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 49, Management, Administration, and Control of the Use of Public Rights of Way, Chapter 49.03, Application Procedures, Section 49.03.02B, Certificate of Registration Application, and is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. We discussed this in committee last week. It's basically a housekeeping to make this particular ordinance read like our other ordinances, taking out money, the fee involved in putting it into our new title, that now Title I that does all the fees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay. Ordinance 138-19 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title I, General Provisions to include fees for use of the city's public rights of way, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. This is the Title I that I just mentioned that needs to be updated with the new fees. Thank you.
Okay. Comments or questions? All right. We'll move on to Ordinance 139-19, which is an ordinance authorizing construction and construction engineering services for the Kimes Reservoir Project number 324, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. We discussed this in committee. Simply, this authorizes the City Service Safety Director, who is here with us this evening, to advertise and accept bids where necessary and to enter into contracts with the lowest and best bidder for construction and construction engineering services for the Kimes Reservoir Project. If you recall, Public Works Director, Mr. Hetty, was here as well and went into discussion about the needs for this, our aging infrastructure, and that this is through a CDBG funding process. Thank you.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
Section 2 and Section 3 address funding sources and amounts. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Reisner.
Are we looking at around $3 million, is that?
So the scale will grow if we add the water lines that we want to add, so that's probably on the high end.
Okay.
I'll get back and dig into that.
Okay, thank you.
Dig into it.
Dig in. Okay.
All right. Ordinance 14019 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Titles 9 and 13 relating to firearms and declaring an emergency, and is introduced by Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the ordinance that was discussed in committee last week, and it is to bring our city codes into compliance with laws passed by the Ohio General Assembly that will become effective on December 28th, 2019, regarding firearms and self-defense cases in court.
Yes, Councilmember McGee.
I just wanted to make sure that the mayor and the city safety service director were aware that they could no longer prohibit the sale of alcohol during a riot, according to this amendment. If you check the amendment, I'm sure the students of Athens will be very happy about that.
That's an interesting preemption.
It is an
Yes.
interesting preemption that the state is basically saying to the city of Athens that you no longer, in the case of a riot, can prohibit the sale of alcohol.
Directly. Yep.
Insane.
Does anyone have a clue why such an asinine thing would be done?
Out of Columbus.
There are other authorities granted to local police agencies during a riot that would effectively, prohibit the sale of alcohol. I wouldn't prohibit the sale of alcohol, but make it moot. Really, once a riot is declared, the local police authority.
Is this sort of like a pro-business thing? We don't want to affect bars in a riot?
It probably, Ohio alcohol laws are.
Ohio is the business-friendly state.
Ohio has complicated alcohol laws. I mean, so
No, I'm just trying to.
Perhaps this is an effort to make them less complicated. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
I can ask. If the members please, I can ask there's a public safety directors association that I'm a part of, and I'll see if anyone else has had problems to where they've attempted to prohibit the sale of alcohol during riots, and it's caused the need for this legislation.
Okay, thanks.
Just to note, it's not only the sale of alcohol, it's gasoline, explosives, guns, all of those things.
Okay.
That our current code prohibited the sale of those during a curfew, and that section is.
Well, maybe they just feel it's fair. If I could buy a loaf of bread in a riot, I should be able to buy a small thermonuclear weapon.
Okay, thanks for the comments, everyone, and the questions. We'll move on to ordinance 14119, an ordinance authorizing disposal of an Athens transit bus no longer needed for a municipal purpose, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley, and civility here. Quite simply, we have an aging 2013 Ford Goshen coach with 194,000 plus miles on it. This authorizes a city service safety director to authorize and sell said vehicle for scrap. So moving forward with, again, old equipment.
Okay, thank you. And yes, a comment from Councilmember Fall.
Normally, we do go through a process of saying to other organizations, nonprofits and towns, hey, would you like this bus? We've done that with a lot of other things, but the fact that this is going for scrap says something about how old and crockety this one is. So,
Okay.
thank you. We get good money, good value for our money out of our equipment.
I think the mileage on this vehicle speaks for itself.
All on brick.
Okay. Ordinance 14219 is an ordinance declaring certain police department firearms no longer needed for a municipal purpose, introduced by Councilmember Butler.
Thank you, President Isley. We discussed this in committee. Section 1 acknowledges that we have, we're declaring 75 firearms, 1 compound bow, 5 ammunition kits, 15 cases of ammunition, 17 magazines for pistols. There is a list accompanying this as well on the back side on your handout. The City Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to dispose of said firearms and items as trade-in to a federally licensed firearm dealer for the purchase of new firearms. And this, again, is something that the city has done in the past. I think following protocol. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Councilmember Paul?
What happens to these armaments when you provide, when it goes to this licensed gun dealer person? What happens to them? Are they melted down or they resale?
Yes, to answer, I believe in those cases, ultimately we don't really know, but from what I understand, if they can be repurposed and resold, they are, and if they're not, they're destroyed.
Okay. And why do we need a compound bow?
You didn't buy that.
Just-
That's a seizure.
Okay.
This is a combination of both.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
The individual useful life of the different caliber from the new ones that we're getting, as well as seizures from various crimes. The compound bow is not carried by our beat officers.
Okay. I was just picturing, Robin Hood running around or something, Thank you.
All right, thanks for the question. 14319 is an ordinance to increase sewer rates, amending Athens City Code Title I, General Provisions, Chapter 1.03, Code Fees Established, Section 5.04.08, Sewer Rates, and declaring an emergency, and is introduced by all members of council. And do we have someone willing to discuss the sewer rates? We'll get comments here, and then Judy, we will, yes. Yes, Councilmember Crowell.
Well, I'll just say, when this was presented to us in committee, knowing that we had increased the sewer rates last year, we requested additional information from the city administration, which we did receive, about the base rate, the water and the sewer base rates for the city of Athens and for numerous municipalities in our general region. And here in Athens, we are still, and even with this increase, below the majority of our nearest neighbors by far: Albany, Amesville, Jacksonville, Bookdale. So with this increase needed for the improvements that we've made to the sewer plant, I think are necessary. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Fall?
I think that many of us were awoken to a degree over the last few years that Athens really hadn't been keeping pace with the costs of a lot of this, and I think that comes through with the information that the administration gave us. However, I think I would rather have maybe such a large increase done and phased in, maybe over a couple cycles. And as we have talked before in various situations, and other service safety directors have talked about it, looking seriously at if you are a low quantity user, like 1,000 gallons and less, that's the base that you can be charged for. Maybe looking and being able to differentially give those people a credit, for being able to conserve, because that's really what we want to go towards in sustainability and those sort of things, of getting people to conserve and do it at the beginning instead of other times. Thank you.
Councilmember Reisner?
We supply water to the plains, don't we? So this will affect the residents at the plains also?
No,
No?
we don't treat the sewage from the plains.
How about our water?
This is a sewer rate increase. that
You're right.
We're requesting from the council.
Sorry.
Okay.
No one drink this one.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments from
Good
council
comeback.
members? Okay. Judy, if you wanted to come up and speak, if you can sign in and let us know your name and
Judy
address.
Wellman, 12 Northwood Drive, Athens. Last week I listened to somebody from the treatment plant, needing more money, and they're talking about some kind of equipment that he needs. Now, instead of us spending $90,000 towards this Bailey steel, which seems like it's going to go anyway, why can't that money be put towards the problems in the water treatment plant?
Thank you. We appreciate the comments.
Yeah, I know.
Let her finish up and then at least let her sign in. And Joni, if you have a comment to make, that would be helpful.
Joan Kornansky. This is a comment I made when the rates went up a year ago. I understood why the rates went up. I wasn't objecting to that. What I was objecting to is what I think Councilmember Fall is referring to. When I calculated it out, if you're using less, the increase was higher by a great percentage. The more you use, the cheaper it got. So what I recommended, if I'm not mistaken, I sent an email to, I think it found its way to Service Safety Director, but that was before he was the Service Safety Director. So when he was in charge of Public Works, is if you're going to do an increase, why not increase the increments as your usage increases? So if you use 2 elements, that should be increased, and then as you go up to use more and more, you increase it at that level at a graduated, rather than dumping the whole increase on those of us that are using a whole lot less. So I'm not complaining about an increase. I understand, and I did a lot of research looking around at surrounding communities, Marietta and others, to see how they handled their water and the percentages that people were charged and for how much, et cetera, et cetera. So the increase was pretty much in line with what everybody else seemed to be doing. I even checked all the way up to northeastern Ohio. But I don't want to be paying more because I'm using less. I think people that are using more at every increase in I forget what the increment is that they
1,000 gallons.
say.
1,000 gallons.
Yeah, every 1,000 gallons. So if you use 2,000 gallons, that amount should be increased. If you use 3,000 gallons, that amount should be increased all the way up, so that people that are using more, and to give them the attitude that they should be conserving and it would cost them less. I mean, it just, to me, is what councilors are trying to do with all these proposals to preach sustainability, right? And yet the sewer bill was preaching just the opposite. So, anyways.
Thanks for the comments, yes.
That's what I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're at our first reading on this one. All right, we have announcements and other business. Any announcements to be made? Yes, Mayor Patterson.
I sent an email out to City Council earlier today just to make you aware of a opposition hearing this week up at the State House. And this is in regards to Senate Bill 222, which is a preemption bill to preempt any city from levying a plastic bag tax or anything else plastic related for that matter. So again, I believe all council received that. I also sent it out to some citizens who I know are on the forefront of looking at other alternatives to plastic bags and plastic bag use. But just know that there is that opposition hearing, because once again, this is another preemption to stop cities from being able to govern ourselves.
It's tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
It's tomorrow, yeah. But, and citizens do have the opportunity to be able to write to their state senator
They
about
do.
that,
Right.
so, yeah.
They do.
Okay.
And I would encourage.
All right. Opportunity for citizens to speak on legislative items and city services that were not covered on the agenda. Is there anyone wanting to speak on another topic? Okay. And next we will have a motion and then a roll call vote for going into executive session. And what we'll do is we will make that motion. I know there are several members still here from the press and the general public who may want to ask questions, and so we'll allow 5 minutes before we close the doors to go into executive session. When we're finished with executive session, we open the doors back up and make a motion to adjourn, so that if you do need to wait, we will be here again after that executive session. So could I have a motion to enter into executive session,
I
please?
move that we go into executive session with all members of the council, the president, the law director, the auditor, the service safety director, and the mayor for reasons of collective bargaining.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And so Councilmember Butler?
Aye.
Reisner?
Aye.
Crowell?
Aye.
Paul? Katsas?
Aye.
McGee?
Aye.
Grace?
Aye.
Okay. All right, so it's 8:24. We'll give it to 8:30, and then we'll close the doors. Thank you.